All right, so now we are recording. Let's go ahead and get this presentation started. Put me in the corner, gonna hide you. Come here. All right. Okay, so welcome to our first arranging workshop of the quarter. Today we are going to be talking about the string family as well as starting an arrangement. So a little bit about myself. I'm actually not a third year music major anymore with an emphasis on composition. I am actually now a music graduate with a bachelor in music. So I forgot to edit that. But this is my seventh quarter in Intermission Orchestra, my fifth quarter arranging, and I'm also your music director. So I'm really happy to work in this interesting environment and help hopefully elevate the music that we're having this quarter. I'm a gamer. I play video games. I know I'm so unique, but yeah. So a lot of the one thing that causes some bias is that a lot of my examples will be video game focused, so please bear with me on that. Just to know that everything I talk about can totally be applied to anime music and film music as well. And I play piano and viola and a few other random instruments here or there that I just find for under 20 bucks. All right, oops, what's going on? There we go. Okay, ooh, we got some chats going. Let me pull that up to the side. Oh, hi, Andre. All right. Good luck on Sally's song. It's a beautiful piece. All right, so just the general overview of how these lectures go is that we have a lecture on a biweekly topic that can range from new score learning to good score etiquette. I'm hoping this quarter to have something a little bit different as with how to write music, how to make music during the pandemic. And I'm currently still doing research on that, and I'm hoping to get that in during week 3. So hopefully that'll be a good and informative topic. And we also discuss an instrument family every single week. Now, we did have these discussions last quarter. I'm thinking of bringing these back, but we'll have to see. I'll ask your guys' interest at the end of this workshop. All right, moving on. So some housekeeping, please bear with me as I have to change certain aspects of this workshop to better suit the online ensemble format, since now we're doing everything online and we're having smaller ensembles. So I'm trying to help gear this workshop a little bit more to making music during this whole crazy stay-at-home stuff. All right, and things suck right now, honestly, more so than when I first wrote this slide way back when. So if you need help on anything, feel free to reach out to your arranging mentor if you have one, or myself, or any of the members of Intermission. They're all such cool members. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started on starting an arrangement. So the first question we got to ask is, what is the arranger? What is your purpose? What is your job in the Intermission Orchestra as an arranger? So an arranger is someone who rewrites already created material into a different arrangement of instruments. Oh no, Daniel, you used the word that you're defining in your definition. Yes, I'm sorry, but it is quite simply that. It's if you have a piano piece, an arranger would arrange that piece for a brass trio, for example. Now, if the previous material doesn't exist for you to arrange, so like, the sheet music, then maybe the arranger might need to transcribe the material. Now, transcribing is the act of writing down musical material by listening to it. So that's when you see people, have their headphones on, constantly rewinding the same part over and over again, writing down every note that they can hear. That's transcribing. So a couple of other terms that will be important that I'll be using a lot in this workshop is medley. So a medley is a piece or a song that combines multiple pieces or songs into one using segues. So you can think of like those medleys on YouTube where they combine a bunch of Super Mario Brother music together, for example, and they all tie into each other. Those are the segues. We have the concept of a suite, which is a musical format where there are 3 or more separate pieces tied together to a single theme. You'll see a lot of intermission orchestra performances utilize suites where an arranger will write 5 pieces connected to one thing. For example, our last quarter when we were all in person, I did a Minecraft suite, which consisted of 3 different pieces that ended. We had a moment to breathe, and then we went into the next one. And then another term is ensemble, which is simply a group of instruments assigned to a piece of music. So that could be anything from like 3 violinists together writing a song for playing a song for 3 violinists. That's our ensemble. So so there are a couple of challenges in regards to video game arrangements, and this also extends to anime and film music as well. I kind of generalize music into these 4 categories. Now, these aren't like set dry, these are more of a spectrum. But just to kind of get an idea of where we're at, there's 4 kinds of video game music out there, in my opinion. There's like the 8-bit music, there's the electronic music, we have acoustic music, and orchestral music. And like I said, it is a spectrum. Things can ebb and flow in and out, but it's helpful to kind of categorize music a little bit to help figure out what is easy and what is tough about working in these different sound spaces. So the first one I want to tackle is 8-bit music. 8-bit music was music used during the early eras of gaming, and because at the time they were very limited in their ability to create audio, to make audio. Nowadays, we can just upload an MP3 file onto a CD, and then that can be read easily. But because that takes up so much space and the cartridges were so small at the time, it was easier to just have data there and then have an internal chip built into it, read those files and create the sounds on the hardware itself. So this limited their soundscape. But because where limitations come, creativity prospers, and we have a bunch of incredible music from this time period that is iconic still today, like our Super Mario Brothers theme or Sonic the Hedgehog, for example. Now, a couple of pros and cons. So let's start with the pros. There's plenty of pros to go around. Since the music is usually older, it is more likely that a transcription exists because they have their fans. People go out and transcribe it already. And the music usually has a very simple instrumentation. Due to the limitations, there was only so many instruments you could have in your piece. So the instrumentation might have at max maybe 5 instruments. Music is typically short, meaning there's less to transcribe if you even have to transcribe. And typically these tunes also have a really wide appeal, since many parents and our peers, they have grown up with this music. Our parents, they were playing Super Mario Brothers when they were our age and younger. And, here we're still playing Mario, Super Mario All-Stars, 3D All-Stars, all those newer Mario games, So these kind of arrangements can really be special. And it's because of its specialness, I think it's a good choice during COVID right now, because it's like a lot of this era of music is really appealing to everybody, and it could really help people, during this time. Now, some challenges in regards to 8-bit music. 8-bit music rarely tries to emulate real-world instruments, so sometimes it'll require some creativity to give these original sounds to different instruments. It's hard for me to give maybe like the Mario theme, for example. I'll keep coming back to that, but like that dun 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 dun. That doesn't initially give me an idea of what instrument to do. Maybe marimba, maybe piano, I don't know. But so you have to be a little creative on that. And also 8-bit music can tend not to be very, harmonically dense. So you might want to include more harmonic context as needed. Due to the limitations of the hardware, it can't make really complex tones like that. And due to the music's short nature, it might be advisable to create a medley or a suite rather than endlessly loop the song over and over again. Oh no, why isn't my, okay, cool, it's coming up. So here's an example. This is Green Greens from Kirby's Dream Land, one of my favorite ones. Can you hear now, Andre? Okay, I can't mute myself. And it repeats. So for an example of an arrangement, there you go again. So after Ishikawa made this piece quite a while ago, back in the 90s, and we've seen Kirby have many different iterations since then. And one arrangement that I want to draw attention to is Green Greens for Super Smash Brothers for 3DS and Wii U, which changes that 8-bit music into a full orchestral score. As you can see, during the second repeat, they fill it out a lot more to give it more growth. And then this arrangement of Green Greens goes on for quite a while. It takes up the full 4 minutes, so it doesn't repeat material, which is quite cool, up until the very end when it does repeat. All right, why are you playing? Okay, cool. So now we have this other category I call electronic music. So many modern games opt to use electronic sounds to expand the sound that 8-bit offers. And it tends to be a favorite amongst indie game developers because most studios aren't able to afford to give a composer an entire orchestra to work with. And electronic sounds can be created in such a way to create unique textures and timbres that acoustic instruments simply cannot make. And I will lump together some console generations into electronic music, such as the Nintendo 64, because a lot of music from that time period tends to find a middle ground between like emulating acoustic instruments and trying to tie themselves to the 8-bit era. So a couple of pros to this kind of approach. The vast amount of textures available allows for easier instrumentation than in 8-bit. And music can be complex enough to better incorporate into the whole orchestra. Excuse me. And some electronic songs also have acoustic instruments, giving you a better idea as to what to focus on. So I'll show you later, right after this slide, an example of Celeste, for example, uses a lot of real pianos, and so I use that a lot in my transcriptions when I did Celeste way back when. You're hearing it from my mic? Hold up, let's make sure. I'm gonna try muting my mic and tell me if you hear it. Or not my mic, just my sound. Can you hear that, Jasmine?
No.
No? Okay.
And there it goes.
But you can hear it from here. Is that fine? The audio quality?
Kind of crunchy.
I imagine. Oh boy. All right, let's try and fix this. Usually this works. I don't know why it's not. doing that.
If you share your whole screen, the audio might go through.
Share my whole screen. Oh, you know what? That might be it too. Let's see. Stop share. Share screen. Screen. All right. Okay, so you can hear that now?
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. All right, so let's move on. I'm sorry for not being able to hear the Kirby example, but let's move on just for the sake of time. So anyways, and yeah, electronic music. Let's go back into presentation mode. You can't have any like Zoom thing without some technical difficulties. Some electronic songs include some acoustic elements. Yeah, I already said that. And I think these can make great ensembles during COVID as well. Typically because the electronic ensembles are smaller, which means you can organize it a lot easier amongst your instrumentalists. But a couple of challenges: electronic passages may be too difficult or even impossible to actually play. I'm thinking a lot about arpeggiators, which is this software that electronic music producers use to make it quickly play through a passage over and over again. Most electronic timbres are not easy to associate with acoustic instruments. They got to be a little creative on that point. And some electronic passages may not have a score available. And that's just simply because that could be out of lack of interest or difficulty. There's many different reasons why it might be difficult to find a transcription already available of this music. So I'm going to be using this example from Celeste, confronting myself and comparing it to my arrangement, and show you where the shortcomings are, and kind of see how those challenges presented itself when I was doing this. So this is the piece, if it's too loud. Okay, that's fine. So you can see here certain aspects of the songs that might be difficult to translate. For example, that main melodic instrument, that thing that's going like part. I have to give a real acoustic instrument to that sound. So that's a challenge. On top of that, you might hear this. So I have to incorporate that into the piece somehow. And honestly, I'm not happy with the outcome because I should have probably nerfed a lot of that clarinet part. But I gave that arpeggiating synths to clarinet 1 and 2 to hopefully try and break it up so they can have time to actually breathe. I gave the bass to the brass section. I gave the voice to the choir, and I gave that melody to the strings because I felt like that was the most accurate. So I'm gonna try and bring us to it. I'm very embarrassed. This is just a MIDI. Next time I'll make sure to upload, because I think we have this performance uploaded. So I'll put that on, but this is the MIDI of that. So let's see if I can just skip to it. So keep in mind, this is the MIDI, so it's not gonna be wonderful quality. So you can hear the clarinet arpeggiating. Sounds great in MIDI. In practice though, that's like tough. And I also gave that arpeggiating synth part to the piano, which was also not a great idea because it's tough, and it repeats a lot. So you have to understand that, yeah, one of the important things, especially when writing for this kind of music, is that you don't give something impossible for your players to play. And that's something that comes with trial and error and rewrites and showing and talking to the players. So moving on, I have this acoustic music. So what do I mean by acoustic music? I think I mean really small, usually small ensembles, a simplistic music. And that's what honestly this should be called, the small ensembles. So sometimes a very small ensemble is used to create the idea of simplicity, ambiance, or intimacy. And these might be defined by pianos or guitars or duets. And this also includes stuff like bands and such, especially for like, if you're listening to a lot of anime, they have a lot of rock bands typically and stuff like that in their OPs. And such music may be best suited for a small ensemble, but it can totally be expanded into an orchestral sound. And you can totally imagine this being applied to Nintendo 64. I'm thinking of like the Banjo Kazooie intro. That would be a cool thing, a cool transcription or arrangement, I would think. Um, and these approaches are also used by composers who compose at the piano to create their pieces. So this is one of those tried and true methods that composers have been using for the longest amount of time. We have even the greats of like Beethoven, Mozart. They compose at their pianos or harpsichords, and bring it into fruition or writing it down onto sheet music for the orchestra. And what's also helpful about acoustic music is that people who want to transcribe and play these music have probably already transcribed or arranged these pieces already. So there's resources out there that you can utilize to your advantage. And I think some pieces are also very easy to visualize in their place in the orchestra. And I'll give you a good example of that in a moment. Now, a couple of challenges with these is that these compositions may have a very small ensemble or even one instrument, like just a piano or maybe just a violin. So you might have to use a lot of creative liberty to fully realize your piece. And these might require some knowledge in theory to help build up your harmonic textures a bit. And it'll also require lots of ear training to identify and mentally separate sections of the piece. What do I mean by that? Well, if you have like a rhythm guitar and a lead guitar playing at the same time, you'll have to be able to differentiate the two, and you can focus on one during your arrangement or transcription process. So for this example, I'd like to show you Marty O'Donnell. He is the former composer for Halo and Destiny. And in this video, he shows his work in progress for a work in progress piece called Piece 6, which he made at the piano. Okay, so with that was Marty O'Donnell's his rough draft, him playing at the piano, developing something. So he got this piece that he made for the piano and he had to transcribe it for the orchestra. And there was aspects he knew he wanted. He had that bum 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 bum, which he knew it was gonna be a fanfare, so it had to be brass. And there's this really sweet section that da 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 da. Like that's gonna be something sweet, like a hymn. And this is what he ended up coming up with. Yeah, so you can hear how that piano piece turned into something, so much larger with the orchestra. So getting these smaller ensembles and translating to the orchestra is an incredible way to make music, and I would highly recommend trying it out if you can. And finally, we have our orchestral music. Typically, we have our large AAA games or, big Hollywood studios. They have the money. They're just printing out money, shoving it out to make this game, this movie, as sellable as possible. They can afford to employ an entire orchestra for their music. Or sometimes they just have really fancy synths and make the music on the computer like Hans Zimmer. And this is also evident in some epic anime music. I'm thinking like My Hero Academia has a lot of that kind of stuff. And orchestral music can also include exotic and sometimes uncommon instruments. During the Nintendo 64 era and other eras like that, we do hear an attempt to add more orchestral soundscapes to their music. And I'm also going to include large jazz ensembles in this section as well. I'm thinking big band. Think Cuphead, for example. Now, here's the pros for an orchestra. You don't have to worry about orchestration. You're listening to the piece, you're like, okay, we got strings, we got brass. You don't have to worry about orchestration. It's right there in front of you. You can just follow along with that. And what you write is likely to be possible to play since it was once actually played by an actual human. So you don't have to worry about passages maybe being too hard. Of course, restrain yourself to the abilities of our orchestra. We're not the London Philharmonic, but it is these passages are possible to play by a real human. And you usually don't need a lot of additions to fully realize your arrangement. Now, a couple of challenges. It may be difficult as if you're transcribing the piece to hear individual parts, since the orchestra can easily overshadow the part you're looking for. This is very apparent when you're trying to transcribe strings, for example. It's hard to differentiate the violins and the violas and the cellos, and maybe not the double bass, but sometimes the double bass. So you have to really be very, very picky with your ear. It might also be difficult to identify and separate contrasting lines. What I mean by that is medley and harmony, counter medleys. It might be difficult to just separate them. It also might stifle your creativity. You might feel like you're just transcribing rather than actually arranging. So that can be a bit of a drag. And certain arrangements can be difficult to translate to the intermission orchestra's needs during normal times. So for example, the Halo theme is a string orchestra. However, the intermission orchestra, we employ brass instruments, we have wind instruments, we have percussions and choirs. So during the normal year, we have these requirements. Our music has to have these certain instruments. So it can be difficult to translate, include brass in your string ensemble piece, but it's totally doable. And another big challenge, especially right now during COVID, is that getting an orchestra piece together can be difficult. Unless you have some people who are willing to layer themselves and play the same passage over and over again in order to simulate an orchestra and you have the correct instruments. It is possible, but it's tough to get that organization going, especially when people are, still doing school and trying to survive. So here's an example of a rearrangement of the Elder Scrolls theme. In this, Jeremy Soule, he introduces us to the Elder Scrolls theme in Morrowind, and we hear it like this. So if you hear that arrangement definitely fits the Morrowind environment and sound of the fantasy environment that you play in. Probably, I haven't played Morrowind. Anyways, so here is Jeremy Soule reprising that theme again for Dragonborn in Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. And the challenge is how you get this piece that was intended for fantasy and put it in the Viking situation. Well, you just arrange it to fit that. And here's how it sounds. And from there on, it goes into the Skyrim theme, the Dovahkiin. So, you can hear how he changed it from this flute string section into big, giant brassy hits, war drums, big, giant, burly man choir for our Vikings. It's important. These things are important in making this music our fit and make it our own. So it's really important that we are arranging. And we have a couple of different kinds of arrangements that you might come across. We have our one-to-one transcription. So this is when you're just trying to copy the music to the best of your abilities. You want to do a Final Fantasy piece, and you hear the strings, you write down the strings as you hear it, etc. A one-to-one transcription. I would encourage expanding out of one-to-one transcription, but it's a good way to really progress yourself into all of this world of arranging. Next, we have cross-genre arrangements. So this is when you just change the genre of the piece. And there's this wonderful YouTube channel. I forget what it's called. It's like 8-Bit Big Band or something like that. And what they do is that they arrange pieces for big band jazz. And it's probably one of my favorite YouTube channels now. So I have a link there. I'll post the slides so you can click it. But it's a Yoshi's Island song, but arranged for big band, and it's awesome. So definitely worth to check out. A very common one that you'll see in the intermission during the normal year is small ensemble to large ensemble, and vice versa. So large ensemble to small ensemble. And that's just basically getting our smaller arrangement, putting it for the orchestra. We have arranging for a specific ensemble. So sometimes people want to make an arrangement for a specific combination of instruments, maybe like a rock band. You'll see online when people do like a metal arrangement of, I don't know, the Animal Crossing New Horizons theme. So they have a specific ensemble in mind, and they make that music, they arrange that music for that ensemble. And so this is only limited to your imagination of how you want to combine instruments. But for example, you could do a piano trio for a classical sound, a rock band, maybe a jazz combo. Getting these pieces to work in these ensembles can be tough, but it's such a rewarding experience to hear like a song that wasn't meant for a jazz ensemble or for a rock band just work. And then finally, we have the idea of a rework, which is just changing aspects of the song radically compared to the original. This one veers on like remixing. So it is tough to do this without like making it recognizable. And so for this example, I actually want to give you guys a comparison between Holland, which was originally shown in Minecraft Dungeons, but was rearranged for Smash Brothers when Steve was added into Smash. And I find this a very interesting video. Okay, let me skip ahead right here. So as you can see, the arranger, he sped up this calm song in order to make it fit into the spirit of Smash Bros. Um, and here is a side-by-side comparison. So, you can really just, if you're gonna rework a piece, take care with that. But you could make some cool stuff. Like, everyone was raving about this arrangement of Holland when the Smash trailer came out. So, it can be really effective if done right. Oh, please stop. Okay. All right, so what song to choose? At this point, you may have already decided on a song to do, but keep a couple of things in mind before choosing. Popular songs will be easier to arrange due to the abundance of transcriptions that already exist. I hate to use Mario again, but there's a billion transcriptions of Mario out there. If you want to do a Mario song, it'll be super easy because Mario is out there. Medleys, or which I described earlier, should be avoided if you're new to arranging because transitions and segues are super difficult, especially between songs of different keys. So I would highly recommend either doing a suite or focusing on maybe just one piece. Shorter songs might need to be repeated once or so. We've done this a couple of times in Intermission, and sometimes they're great. I think an example is Slide from Super Mario 64 that was done by Koji, and that one repeated the entire thing once, I think. It was incredible. It's one of my favorite performances, I think, was that Slide one. And suites, if you're doing anything that's going to be long, please don't go over 8 minutes for multiple reasons. For one reason is the rehearsal time would be strained. Your piece is just not going to sound the way you want it to because you won't have time to rehearse everything. It's a lot of music too. All right. So during normal quarters, we do have a voting process. So I'll briefly go over it. Some voters listen to every requested song, but not all do. So choosing something from a popular franchise can help your cause, but that's also a double-edged sword because if you pick a popular franchise, you might end up vote splitting because, someone might want to do something from, let's say, Fire Emblem, and there's 3 different Fire Emblem songs being recommended. And so people end up voting for the different Fire Emblems, and then boom, nobody does Fire Emblem. So you got to be careful on that kind of stuff. The more arrangements you do, the more likely you are to be chosen in the following quarter. And progress on your arrangement is important. So if you're finished before the voting period, that helps a ton. And but right now, as we're doing online stuff, we are accepting all piece proposals. So if you have a piece you want to do but you're afraid of rejection, this is the time to try because you're going to be accepted no matter what. We want you. All right. So, and then finally, one little tidbit is that we want you to arrange, not just transcribe. So please try and dig deep and be creative and add something, add your personality. We want people to hear, your arrangement of, I don't know, Tomodachi Life, and I don't want people to say, wow, that's Tomodachi Life. We want to say, wow, this is Tomodachi Life done by this person. This sounds like this person made it. And that's something that's ooh, it feels good. Feels real good. So a couple of resources to help you out. YouTube, most games don't have an OST out. So you can look up the songs on YouTube and you'll find them. Using playback speed, you can hear faster passages, slower, make them slower to hear them better. MuseScore.com, that is a website where people upload their arrangements, their scores, so you can look through that and maybe find some transcriptions or arrangements. Notation software will be important to getting their music out. That includes things like Sibelius, Notion, and MuseScore and Finale. We'll talk about MuseScore next time, as it is, in my opinion, the best best entry-level notation software out there. And then there's Transcribe / Audacity. So Transcribe is a software that is designed to assist people who transcribe, usually people who transcribe jazz music, and it helps them find harmony and melody and bass lines. It's super helpful, but it does have a price, so you have to pay for it. Chord charts, if you go on to any website that provides chords that might be helpful for you, there's a website called Chordify, which will create chord charts of almost any YouTube video. So you can just go on chordify.com or whatever, put in your link, and it'll try to give you chords for that. Digital audio workstations, if you somehow have access to FL Studio, Pro Tools, Ableton Live, Studio One, Reaper, what's the one, GarageBand on Mac, you could use that to help you create your music by writing to MIDI and then exporting to your notation software. This is a technique used by Lewis, who you might know did a lot of our really, really well done Zelda pieces in the past. So this is a strategy he uses. It does, but usually these softwares are expensive. Reaper is a free one if you want to try this out, but yeah, it is an option. And existing PDFs, scores of anything, anywhere can help. So a couple of tips. Ask yourself a couple of questions when you're arranging. What was the composer trying to like do with this kind of music? And how can you like focus in on that? Is there any way you can add something to the music to really build up that atmosphere rather than just listening to music in the game, make it feel like how the player feels when they play the game, for example? How much original content should you add? How much you don't want to distract from the original music. So how much should you add? How much should it come out? Those are important questions to consider. And how can I vary repetitions so the music doesn't get too repetitive? That one's a tough but fun one to do. Listen to other arrangements. You can be inspired by them. When I was doing Minecraft, I listened to any arrangement I could find. I listened to orchestral ones. I listened to like ukulele ones. I listened to lo-fi hip hop ones, trap arrangements, weird stuff, anything to just pull some inspiration, because I know at the end of the day, these arrangements were created by people who care about the franchise and have their own personal experience with the franchise. And they're showing their love, their passion, and their experiences through their arrangement. So, you can kind of absorb that and kind of through osmosis incorporate their experiences into your music. And then you should either tackle a section at a time or a part at a time. By a section at a time, I mean maybe focus on the melody, focus on the harmony, focus on the percussion, then the bass line. That'll help you kind of organize how you're doing it. And then, or part at a time. So maybe listen only to the guitar and you're like, okay, this is the guitar part. I'll listen only to the violins. Okay, this is the violin part, etc. Use audio editing software like Audacity. Transposing to a higher key will help you hear bass lines a lot better. So use anything you can. Don't be afraid to add new content to your arrangement. I've said this a lot. There's this really cool arrangement of Zelda Ocarina of Time's Gerudo Valley. I can't say it right. I haven't played this game, but it adds this really cool piano intro. So don't be afraid to add new content. Watch, read interviews of the composer, study your hotkeys for your notation software. I've linked MuseScore's hotkeys. There's some links to arranger guidelines and ranges for intermission as well. All right, how are we doing on time? I feel like I'm going way too long. I'm at 34, so I have 30 minutes to run through the string section. Let's just get into it. Let's go. All right, here are the strings family. They all look very similar in the pictures, but I can assure you they are different sizes in real life. The one on the left is small, very small. The one on the right is very big. So a couple of terms we should have. Oh, let me look at chat real fast. Chat isn't coming up. Where's my chat? I can't see chat, guys. It's not coming up for me. I'm sorry. Whatever you guys are saying, I'm sure it's awesome. Oh wait, I saw it for a brief moment. Volaga. Violaga. What's the Violaga?
It's like a joke on Final Fantasy spells.
Oh, okay. I'm not a Final Fantasy player. I gotta play at some point. I want to play. I think they just put Final Fantasy 7 on the Game Pass, so maybe I'll do that. Okay, so a couple of terms when it comes to our string instruments. We have our bridge, which is the point of the instrument where the strings are suspended. This is this wooden part right here. We have the fingerboard, which is the long black part of the instruments that the strings hover over right here. We have the act of fingering, which is placing a finger on a string against the fingerboard, which helps the player choose the notes. We have the concept of open strings, which is playing a string that without pressing in a finger. So if you can imagine just like plucking the strings without touching the fretboard at all, the fingerboard at all. And then we have the act of bowing, which is when you draw the bow across the string. Let's go back into presentation mode for pretty's sake. We've got ranges. These ranges are readily available on Google. One thing to note is that the viola does not use the traditional treble clef and bass clef. It is one of the few instruments that uses alto clef. So if you're gonna write for viola, get familiar with alto clef and cry. Here are our open strings. On the violin, we have their lowest string, and the lowest note it can hit is a G. Its next string is D, its next string is A, and its highest string is E, and then its ranges extends beyond that. And so on and so forth. One thing to note about the double bass is that it is written an octave higher than it sounds. So even though it is playing, I wonder if you guys can hear this, even though it's written like, oh, that's loud, like this, it sounds like, I don't, it's really hard, pitch classes or something, these transposing instruments we'll get more into later with like the brass instruments because they have a lot of that stuff going on. So yeah. Let's talk about the violin. The violin's awesome. The violin has a powerful high range and it's these sweet, intimate lower and mid sections. And in orchestras, violins are split into two sections, violin 1 and 2. Typically, violin 1 are the lead violinists. They play the melody, usually harder parts. Violin 2 usually supplies counter melody, or sometimes they double with the violin ones. So very important to the orchestra. Here's a violin concerto by Tchaikovsky. You know, violinists, they like to play the instrument with their face too. So that's important. We have the good old viola. The viola has a bit of a more subdued, mature tone. It hits lower pitches than the violin, and it's perfect for sections of beautiful mid-range parts. But one thing to note is that shifting isn't as common as it is on the violin, especially in intermission. So probably be careful about going way too high on the viola. But totally doable. Viola is a great instrument, totally not biased. This is an entire viola section, by the way. Yeah, so it's typically a slower instrument, but it's a gorgeous instrument and very, very essential if you want to do your middle harmonies. Next, we got the cello. I love the cello. I'm going to be honest, cello is one of my favorite instruments. It's a deeply romantic instrument. It's a gorgeous instrument, and it can be very powerful and confronting. If you think about the Halo theme, the cellos are the ones that are doing the dun, 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 dun parts. But it also has this warm high range and this really striking low range. And you can't talk about the cello without talking about Bach's First Prelude. Gorgeous instrument. Welcome, Crichton. All right. So let's move on to the double bass. The double bass is the deepest instrument in the orchestra. It has a really fun, bouncy pizzicato, and it can be surprisingly versatile. The double bass is not just used in classical environments, but also in jazz environments, typically plucked. And I will give you an example of I think this is an arrangement. I don't remember exactly, but this is by Schubert's, his sonata, third movement, Allegretto, featuring the double bass, and I think the piano as well. Play. Yeah, it's an awesome instrument. Write good double bass lines, and the double bassists will love you forever. So next, we have a couple of techniques that the stringed instruments are able to do. Now they are possible of being polyphonic, meaning they can play multiple notes at the same time through the use of double, triple, and quadruple stops. Now, what these are multiple notes being played across multiple strings at the same time. So what this is the bow is dragging across two strings at the same time during the double stop. And now it is restricted by the tuning of the strings, so you have to keep in mind that you're making a stop that is actually possible. Otherwise, they will have to just pick and choose one because it would literally be impossible to play. So you have to be very, very keep in mind what is possible with the tunings of the instruments. Now there are triple and quad stops as well, but they have to be played staggered because unless you're like really digging into the bow, you can't play all three. You can't play a triple stop all at the same time. It's typically kind of glissandoed, and especially with quadruple stops, those ones are glissandoed. So here is an example of how it looks on sheet music. And this is a triple stop, and we have a quadruple stop right here. You can also split sections themselves using divisi and tutti. So divisi means half the players will play a higher note and the other half will play a lower note. That way you can play those intervals that aren't possible on the stops. You can just divide the section in half and get them to play these different sections. And the material can be completely different. You can have one play maybe a harmonic line where they're just playing whole notes, and then the other half of the divisi is playing the melody. And then you can use a tutti to indicate to the players that now that we're done with the divisi, now we're all going to come together and start playing at the same time. Other techniques we have are a glissando, which is when the string players slide their finger up and down the strings. There are two different glissandos. You have a slide glissando, which is notated by a straight line. That's just like that do kind of thing. And we also have a squiggly line, which is a chromatic glissando. In this case, they're going to play every note up to that note. Kind of like on the piano, you have this, oh, you have this chromatic scale. I don't know if you guys heard that, but that's how it would be played if you saw a little squiggly line. There's also vibrato. So this allows for more expressive playing, and it's typically natural for experienced players to add vibrato, but you can notate if you want no vibrato or lots of vibrato using text in your score. You can specify what kind of string you want to use in your music. So for example, this is a D in viola, for the viola. D is an open string, but you can specifically notate that you want this played using the third string, which is the G string. So this first note will be played on the G string, fingering with the fourth finger, but then this note would be played open. So this allows you to do unison double stops if you wanted to do that at the same time. You could have one being played on one string and one played on the other. That can make an interesting effect. We're going to go ahead and skip this example for now, but this is just a string quartet. You can see them all in action, playing a very interesting extended techniques as well. A couple of bowing techniques we have détaché. So this is where every note gets one bowing. This is the standard way of playing, so there's no special notation for this. This just basically means if you have 4 quarter notes in front of the person, they're just going to go bum, 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 up, down, play one bow for each one. We have a slur. Now, notes played in a slur will be played with one bowing. So let's say we have those quarter notes and they're ascending. So now what's going to happen is we're going to do those da na 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 na, but it's going to be all smooth on one bow, like na 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 na, and that allows for a more legato sound. It's good for expressive passages and also helpful for fast passages too. And just keep in mind that players only have so much bow, so longer slurs may be played quieter, and if it goes on way too long, they will use staggered bowing, which is where they'll take turns redrawing their bow, so that way the sound is continuous. Next we have the tenuto. So the tenuto indicates to the player to emphasize the rhythm of the note and play the whole rhythm. It allows for emphasis on a rhythm without it being too legato, but also without having to do like an accent, make it really loud. And it's notated with a line over or under the note, like so. We also have our staccato, which is a shortened, almost drop-like sound, and it is notated with a dot over or under the note. And so one thing to note is that on open strings, if you play a staccato, the strings will reverberate and vibrate more. So keep that in mind if you want to specify a string to change that timbre. And that's like played like more like short, bump, bump, bump. Next we have the marcato. Now, so the marcato is played more forcefully than an accent with a staccato detachment. This is something you want to use for like big, just marchy section. And they're notated with an upside down V or a caret. And here's how marcatos look over a C major scale. We have the martelle, which is notated with staccatos over slurred notes. That means it's played with one bow, but you're bouncing off the bow in one direction. So for this situation, you might want to give bow directions. We have these, this V, which is a up bow, which is like pushing the bow up. And then we have this kind of bracket, which is a down bow. So this is played like up, up, down, as you can see. Here's an example, I believe, of that martelle from Stravinsky's Orpheus Pas de Deux. Let's see if I can zoom in. Pay attention right here. This is where the strings are. So you can hear that. You can even see it in the sheet music. Oops, that went back. What'd you do that for? Let me see if I can zoom in a bit. So you can see right here we have a staccatos over slurs. This is our martelle. Da, da, da. So you have this kind of and then slide down. So it's really fun to play, and it has an interesting effect. Another effect, we have trills. This is notated with a wavy line across the staff, or you have the little TR for trill. And this is when we rapidly alternate between a note indicated and a note directly above it in a given key, unless it's modified by an accidental. Now, it's not really recommended with open strings, but you can do it. And so here's a trill on the third beat of measure 1, ending before measure 2. So we're trilling on this B note. Got ourselves a tremolo. This is, how do I say, notation. So how we write this is a 30-second note hashes on each note, or we can use text saying trem. And it is done by playing rapidly with the bow back and forth across the string, usually at the tip of the bow, to create a trembling effect. You hear this a lot in like horror movies or whatever. I'm thinking Intermission Impossible, you have that doom, and then it goes into the bum, bum, ba-dum. So that's our tremolos. And tremolos can be played between notes that are playing a trill. So like you can see in this circumstance, we are rapidly changing between this note and this note, or this note and this note. So this is something you can do with tremolos. We got some other effects, soltasto, which is on the fingerboard. Remember our fingerboard right here. And what this gives is a soft, hazy sound when we bow closer to the fingerboard. It's a soft, hazy sound that can really add a lot of texture to your sound. And you notate this with just with a text notation. And we have sol ponticello, which means on the bridge. So instead of playing here in a normal spot, we're playing close or on the bridge. And this can give a metallic sound, a very dry sound. And that you can, and you just notate with text. And for both of these circumstances, you can end these kind of sections with norm, meaning normal, and then people will play normal. And then we got good old pizzicato, where we pluck the strings with our fingertips on the fingerboard. This is a common technique. It is notated with pits, and you can end it with an arco, meaning to go back to normal bowing. Pizzicato is cool. Please use pizzicato. Let's talk about some extended techniques. Extended techniques are techniques that aren't widely used, typically because they are kind of untraditional sounds, but they can add a lot of texture to your piece. In this case, we have conlengo, which means we're dealing with the wooden part of the bow. We have our horsehair part of the bow, and then we have the wooden part of the bow, and we're playing with the wooden part. We got our conlengo trotto, and what this is when you bow with the wood of the bow. Now, typically, they don't bow exclusively with the wood of the bow. They'll use like 50% of the hair and 50% of the wood. And what this makes is a very eerie sound. Now, I would advise caution on this because this is one of those techniques that might get people pissed because it can damage bows. So if you don't want to do this, maybe do this in a small ensemble, or make sure they're okay with doing this. It's notated with text, conlengo trotto, and you'll probably have to explain to the orchestra how to play conlengo trotto. Next, we have conlengo battute. So this is this occurs when you bounce the wood of the bow on the string, and which gives a little bit more of a percussive sound. Now, this is much less damaging than conlengo trotto, but it could damage strings, but not nearly as much as like conlengo trotto. And it's not a very loud sound, so you would probably want to use this during quieter passages. So here's a couple of examples. Here's conlengo trotto from Mahler's Symphony No. 1, third movement. Right here. All right, let's get this out of the way. So right here is that violin section. You can see in the text it says conlengo, and then we're given this sound, that little squeaky, eerie part. Next we have, oh, looks like this link is dead. Okay, well, we'll have to skip Come and Go Trotto, but Come and Go Trotto is, or Batut is awesome. I wish we could have been able to hear that. I didn't know that they took down the channel. And then we have a bunch of other extended techniques such as snap pizzicato or the Bartok pizz. This is when you pull the string and you release it and it smacks the fingerboard. And it's super loud. It's super cool percussive effect. You have microtones, which are the notes in between the notes of the common 12-tone scale. This isn't something you probably use unless you're doing like Middle Eastern music, Indian music, etc. You can play behind the bridge, which creates a sharp, shrieking, high-pitched, eerie sound. It doesn't have a definite tone, so you don't rely on it playing a specific note, but it's more of an effect. And you can hear it in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, that sound. It's cool in the Psycho theme. You have silent fingering, which is when you finger the strings super duper hard. This is kind of the equivalent of if you play the guitar, it's like tapping, only it's not nearly as loud because you don't have any pickups. And in knocking, you can like, knock the instrument, hit it, wherever, and since it has the capability of projecting that sound, you can get an effect out of knocking on the instrument. Couple of things to avoid with the instrument: avoid big and very quick movement on the larger instruments. For example, that double bass piece I showed you, it's an awesome piece, probably not an easy piece for a bassist to play. Give them interesting stuff to play, but don't give them something that's impossible. That's something that only a violinist would be able to play. Now, and then of course, certain stops aren't possible. I iterated that a lot when we were talking about double, triple, and quadruple stops. Pay attention to your stops. Don't make impossible stops. Otherwise, it's going to completely ruin your workflow when you're talking to your instrumentalists. Avoid fast pizzicatos. The fingers can only move so fast in this position. I think typically the double bass is actually a lot better on that because they can use more fingers easily. But on the smaller instruments, fast pitch sections are hard. Careful for long, fast sections in intermission. Those ones can get really tiring and it'll start sounding muddy. It's totally doable with practice, but practice, what is practice, I guess, is what I'll say. And impossible slurs. Remember, there's only so much bow, so don't make a slur that encapsulates the entire piece. Otherwise, the instrumentalists are just going to ignore it. And ugly scores. We'll talk about how to make your scores pretty at a later time, but try to keep your scores looking nice. Another thing is staccato tenuto. This is a rookie mistake. I've done this mistake. I've seen a lot of arrangers do the staccato tenuto. String instrumentalists look at this and they have no idea what you want out of this. So there's probably, if you have an idea of what you want to do, there's probably a better way of notating it that isn't staccato tenutos, because staccato tenuto is an oxymoron. How are you going to play something short but also long? You might as well just get rid of them and just play them as normal, détaché. So I know one thing you want to know is like the role of the violin in the orchestra. I want to encourage the idea of locking a section to a specific role. The instrument or the section that you are working on is what you want them to be. Like the contrabass, the double bass, they can play medleys too. Why restrict them to just the bass lines? The only thing that limits the role of an instrument section is the range of the instrument and technical difficulties of that instrument. So, you can really just expand your horizons and do cool stuff with different sections outside of their traditional role. There are many different instrumentations you can write for strings. You have your solo, typically virtuosic pieces used by musicians to learn and grow with their instruments, typically difficult, as virtuosic music typically is. You can do string trios, duos, quartets, etc. You can write music for any number of string instruments. You have the piano trio, which I've heard is one of the hardest arrangements to do. This is a piano, violin, and cello, or any mix of string instruments, as long as it has one piano and two stringed instruments. You have your jazz combo, the double bass, in combination with other jazz instruments, can create a jazz combo. You have your string orchestra, which is an orchestra consisting of only strings for melodic and harmonic sections, which can contain a percussion section, just not other instruments, and other like brass or wind. And of course, the full orchestra, which can be used to carry medley or harmony or create percussive moments as well. So some final thoughts, and it looks like we're wrapping up kind of on time too. Nice. Articulations can be put on top of each other. You can have, your accent and your staccato at the same time. Harmonics, I haven't talked about harmonics, but I should talk about harmonics at a different time. But harmonics, both natural and artificial, are achievable on stringed instruments. I just skipped them due to time. I'd love to talk about harmonics, but harmonics is hard. And once I wrap my head around it and I'm able to explain it, I'll include it on a later slide. Extended techniques are not limited to the provided list. You can experiment, make some weird stuff, as long as the instrumentalist will tolerate you doing certain things to the instrument. What is my dog doing? Okay. If you're unsure if something is possible, you can look for precedent by looking at scores or asking a section leader, asking other instrumentalists if something is actually doable. And I would say also listen to classical music with the score. I recommend classical music just because newer music, it's much harder to find the score without having to pay for it. And typically they're like shitty arrangements meant for like beginning band classes. So I would highly recommend looking at classical music and looking at the score and following along as you read. I know when the library, I don't know what the status of Geisel is right now, but Geisel has a massive catalog of sheet music, and you can go down there, find a random piece of music, listen to the music and follow along, and you could learn a lot just by reading the music while you're listening to it. All right. So I do also have a link to a bunch of relevant pieces, different cool stuff. Like I said, I'll link the slides, and you guys can check it out. It's some good stuff. I even included Joker because I'm cool and edgy. I like the Joker. Have you guys watched the Joker? It's a good movie. Anyways, next week, I forgot to update this slide. Next week, we'll talk about, I think it's the wind section. We'll talk about the wind section and muse score. So that'll be helpful for anyone who's starting out with our notation software. With that being said, I'm going to say bye to everyone. So yeah, that's awesome. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I'm going to stop recording right now. How do I stop recording? All right, here we go.